Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. It used to be that best practices in sales were pretty standard across the board. But since the pandemic, and with the advent of artificial intelligence, says Lance Tyson, founder of the Tyson Group Sales Consultancy, it's like the Wild West out there. Suddenly, everyone's playing by different rules, and the best sales approach can vary, depending on the seller, the target, the industry, the region of the country. The keys, Tyson says in this week's bonus episode, are to pay attention and stay flexible. Along the way, he also addresses a host of hot topics in sales. How important is it to see a prospect face to face? Is cold calling dead? Will AI replace sales trainers? What's the right balance between base and commission? How do you handle the salesperson who can't or won't be a team player? How do you get salespeople to take maintaining their CRM seriously? Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these conversations, brought to you by our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. magazine named the best newsletter for business owners and which you can subscribe to for free at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me on this episode is Lance Tyson, founder of the Tyson Group. The episode is titled, Are Salespeople Built or Born? Welcome, Lance. It's great to have you here. Tell us a little about your business. What do you do?
Thanks for asking. Tyson Group is in the business of working with sales leaders and their team to help them compete in a complex world, essentially. Our direct customer is usually the leader in a small to mid-sized business. That could be the CEO, that could be the president of a company, the founder. In a mid-sized business, that could be a VP of sales, chief sales officer. I mean, it's really anything that is relatable to sales too. So if you think of cousins to sales, right? So service is a cousin to sales. Account management is a cousin to sales, right? So sales leadership, that sales leader, if you think about it, really there's several factors that they have underneath their purview or their architecture. It's how they lead, what's the culture of sales they have in an organization, or how they manage, which is how they measure KPIs. Then, you have things like what kind of sales process is being applied from something, very simple to complex. Methodologies are in there. Then you would have effectiveness. Enablement right now is really big. I mean, there's a lot of industries that are trying to apply this fast moving sled of AI into how they manage accounts, how they, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And then the last thing, the age old question is getting the right talent. And then the bottom line is, are salespeople built or are they born?
You got a quick answer to that one?
I do. It is my firm opinion that it's statistically improbable for a salesperson these days to be good at everything you would need to be good in for sales. So I think they're built. I think you got to decide, do you have a salesperson who is really good with the people side of it? And then you have a salesperson that could be really good at the process side. And the key is, I guess that the people side of it would be more art. The process side would be more science. And I think you're looking for an architect, so nothing's built to scale. So it's sales is half art and half science. So I still think it's statistically improbable for somebody to be good at everything. Yes, I would concur there are some people that are just really good at dealing with people, right? And we gravitate to that, but that doesn't always make the best salesperson, though. That makes us somebody good with human relations.
There's so many things I want to dive into with you, but I want to hear a little bit more about Tyson Group. You have a focus on sports, don't you? Is that right?
Yeah, actually, it's. I would say it's where we cut our teeth. I would say the sexy part of our business is probably everybody likes to talk about sports, and you and I are pretty much Philly guys. So we started off our conversation talking about Philly sports, and you said, "Hey, Lance, who do you cheer for?" And I would say, whoever's the bigger customer at this point. That's where we go. I think today we have a trainer in Minnesota. We have one in Dallas with one of the Dallas teams. We have somebody with the Los Angeles Dodgers and not a salesperson, trainers, one in with the Calgary Flames, right? Amongst another 9 projects that are outside of sports, but sports tends to be interesting. And what do you train sports people on? Well, like anything else, they have multiple products, right? If you're a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles, they have media and naming rights to sell. And that, people aren't just lining up to buy that stuff. That all has to be sold, right? You have premium seats that are sold to B2B. If you were the Philadelphia Phillies, and I'm just bringing up those teams right now because they're in the metro that you and I have in common. But they have the same challenges that everybody else does. They have talent challenges. They have product challenges. They have marketplace challenges. They have post-COVID challenges, right?
How did you develop that expertise? Did you seek the sports teams to specialize in, or did it just happen?
I cut my teeth in the training industry. I was really into personal development back in the day. So I remember reading Stephen Covey's book when I was really young, entering a business. I was an Anthony Robbins fan. And then a buddy of mine said, hey, if you really want to be good at anything in life, including business, you got to read this book by Dale Carnegie called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I remember going to the King of Prussia Mall. I bought the book. And then I was like, I want to be in that industry. And I actually started my career with Dale Carnegie training in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And I literally kind of rose up through the ranks here in the Philly area. I learned how to train and sell training. And we had a deal going with the Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce that we were co-sponsoring the Dale Carnegie class. And I got a trade with the Philadelphia Eagles, actually, ironically enough, that we would train all their salespeople and we would do sales training for them for tickets, access to tickets. At the time, the vice president of sales was a gentleman named Len Komorowski, and he put everybody through. And then I had left the Dale Carnegie operation in Philly and bought and invested in the one in Cleveland. And Len then became the acting president of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And from there, that kicked off a domino effect of relationships. And now we probably own 48% of the market share in pro sports just as it relates to training and consulting. But that's not the only thing.
What percentage would you say of your business is the sports side?
2018, we launched Tyson Group. And under that, we quickly went after pro sports as a go-to-market strategy. I had a good name. The system had a good name. So that at one point was almost 90% of our business. And right now, I would say it's about 60% of our business. We have a good, strong foothold there. I would say very good relationships there in different markets. But we do business with all kinds of different manufacturers, different supply companies, all kinds of businesses. So there's tech companies, medical supply companies. We have two pretty large pharmaceuticals we work with. So what our customers all have in common, Lauren, is there is an opportunity or a challenge or a problem in how they're trying to do business through sales. And we literally do a gap analysis. We look what needs to be adjusted the most, and we help them develop a new strategy toward it. That's our goal.
Can you give us a sense how big the business is?
Yeah, we're about 25 employees. We're north of about 5 million. And we're growing at about 35-40% a year.
Wow.
I think we have employees in 15 different states. Lauren, we are truly a remote organization. Even though we're based in Columbus, Ohio, Dublin, Ohio, actually, I think we have 2 people in Dublin, Ohio, 3 people in Ohio proper. We are in every time zone in the U.S. at this point. And one of our marketing people is moving back to India, so we will be in a different time zone. Actually, we have one of our associates on our social media team lives in France. Also, he plays some pro hockey over there, but also works about 30 hours a week. So we're truly a very geographically diverse organization. And
was that true before COVID?
Yeah, you know what it was? COVID not being in the office didn't affect us negatively how we managed the organization. So it's about any version of what our company was. Like when we were at Dale Carnegie in 2005, I can remember we'd had 4 different offices from Cleveland to Indianapolis. And we were I can remember then being on Yahoo Messenger, kind of like, almost using it like a Slack at that point. So we've never been really challenged. We have a certain etiquette, a certain process we run our internal meetings on. We're very KPI driven. We have a very simple formula with how we run the business. People need to be able to communicate why their job exists, what the major goal of their job is. Everybody has multiple goals in their job. What are the KPIs or performance standards needed to get the job done? And we're very transparent about that. Being extremely transparent helps with being so remote. Everybody knows what the number is. Like we have about 7 isms in the company. And one of the number one isms, right? Tyson-isms or whatever you want to call them, I guess, are value statements is you can't win if you don't score. Everybody knows what the score is at Tyson Group. They know what our growth numbers are. They know what our profitability numbers are. They're tied into those things.
Did demand for your services increase with the pandemic?
No, we panicked like everybody else. Everybody has their version of tragedy and the uphill battle and slaying the dragon. I was at Madison Square Garden and I was there that day and they were having the Big East tournament. And I kind of remembered, I remember 9/11 and I had hurt my back and I was leaving early because my back was really sore and they were canceling the Big East tournament. They started to cancel some games. I think Marquette was playing and I remember leaving the hotel and parents just being pissed off. By the time I landed in Columbus, I got a text from one of my staff members, Sean, that said they just canceled the NBA season. I go, come on. I couldn't even believe it.
I remember that day.
So at that point going in the pandemic, right, and my board's always challenged me, hey, you never want to have one client that's too big. You never want to all eggs in one basket. And we had started to diversify a little bit in different verticals, but a lot of our business was tied up in sports, and sports just literally, other than the NFL, but there was no fans there, right? So it just shut down. So we hit the panic switch. So I would say we went down to a very, very low number. Good news is we had decent cash reserves. I wouldn't say we were pandemic proof, but we made good decisions before that. But we immediately, like everybody else did, we made adjustments to staff very quickly. We insulated up. And then what we did in the pandemic is we just literally, to all our clients, just offered free training and coaching, whether they were under contract or not. And we just gave. We were going from noon to night. And there are some markets that didn't even participate in the pandemic. And I'm not being sarcastic. Every marketplace had a different view. Like Arizona had a different view than Texas, than Florida, than Pennsylvania, sure, and New York. So we just tried to accommodate as much as possible. And it was right in the middle of the pandemic. Madison Square Garden teed up as it was starting to show life, or they were getting ready. And we signed a contract right in that summer. And it was a sizable enough contract. I would say that gave us a little breathing room. But since then, it's slowly grinded back up. But it's different now. We really started to do a hell of a lot more consulting and coaching than just more of a purely training solution.
So much has changed because of the pandemic. And I think that's true with sales. The most obvious thing being the Zoom versus travel issue. Tell me about that. Have things really changed, or are we back where we were before the pandemic?
No, I think it's different. It's just different. I think then how people do business that's changed dramatically. Not very long ago, I think it was 6 months, I was on the phone with a manufacturing company, and the president of this manufacturing firm really kind of got into it with me, and he suggested, and I'll paraphrase, Lance, if you're trying to sell us this hybrid selling model, it's not going to work. We don't need that. I don't want that. And I said, his name was Jeff. And I said, Jeff, with all due respect, it doesn't really much matter what you want. It's what your prospects are asking for. And your prospects, based off of the conversations we've had with your salespeople, with looking at different data points, you might think you need to be face-to-face with everybody, but your prospects and your buyers are saying no. So that's fine. You can keep pushing this. You got to be face-to-face, but it's not what everybody else is telling you. And then we kind of had a longer conversation, and I said, why does this whole concept get you so fired up? And he went on to say that he felt the age of his seller couldn't accommodate as much as these conversations that we're having in a hybrid way. And that hybrid way is not face-to-face. If you think about it now, one of the biggest challenges in sales is this fragmentation, because you're having conversations with people over text, over email, over voice note, over voicemail, face-to-face, and it's this combo of things. And he just didn't think that as salespeople were going to be able to move the needle on some of these, manufactured products.
He has older salespeople who might not handle the technology well.
Yeah. And I said, look, your problem's not the technology. Your problem's talent. And, you can teach an old dog a new idea, right? You can, if that's what it comes down to. And then you're going to have to hold these folks accountable and then slowly deal with this. But you can't keep sending them out. People don't want to be out. Like, part of your sales process is going to be hybrid. And I think what's happened for most is, sales leaders, decision makers have to make a decision about how they're going to address the marketplace. So their sales process, methodology, and people are going to have to be adaptable or pliable. Now, there's a secondary factor to that too. There's an expectation of employees, and this is anywhere, of, people have learned to, there's another side of life, right? I can get my job done from my house. I don't need
to commute.
Yeah, I don't need to be there. And that's affected negatively in some cases, especially around sales culture. And so some leaders don't know how to deal with culture if people aren't right there with them, because there is look, you can't argue that, these people aren't control freaks, but there is a method to having a huddle room and just bouncing ideas off each other. There's a lot of synergy there. There's a methodology to managing by walking around, right? Not everybody's able to hold people accountable to a goal or to a performance standard, and some businesses are different. So that's affected the culture piece. And so we spend a lot of time there also. So I think it's both from the sales leadership and motivation standpoint to also the methodology and process.
Do you think a salesperson can be as effective virtually as they are in person?
Listen, if I were going to put money toward it, if you're going to ask me if I was going to bet, look, it's a hell of a lot more forgiving if you and I are face to face with each other having a cup of coffee, right?
Sure.
There's a 360 element there that, we are, let me say it this way. Your EQ goes up dramatically if all your senses are being addressed, right? Like, I'm a few feet from you, there's synergy, there's smells, there's sights, there's different sounds, right? And it's way more forgiving. I can make way more mistakes. So if I were going to put $1,000 to it, if you said, Lance, do you think somebody's going to get a sale more because they were on a Zoom call or more because they're face to face? I give it to the face to face. I said, but you're going to have to be agile, and you might not be able to do that. So then let's go to. I take a Zoom call over a phone call any day of the week and twice on Sundays. It's hard to imagine that we, back in 2019, we were still on conference calls. I can't even imagine a conference call at this point. Right? I was literally calling people today, and it still feels weird. You're usually on a Zoom, right? You can see people.
Yep.
But the thing that has to be addressed if you're going to go into this hybrid selling or any kind of business, even if you're negotiating with a vendor, it wouldn't really much matter. Face-to-face would be better in a negotiation than in writing or over technology. The skill set, though, through a Zoom call, the skill set really becomes, the onus becomes more on verbal economy with your ability to really facilitate the conversation. Because you got to really facilitate if you're on this. You don't have the time. You can see them. You don't know if they're paying attention. And then your ability to ask check-in questions or evaluative questions, like, hey, what are your thoughts on that? Or opinion-seeking questions. You got to be really good at that to move the conversation on. Because I can't tell if I'm on a Zoom with somebody, training them, trying to sell them something. I can't tell if they're really paying attention. I mean, they could be watching YouTube for all I know. You know what I mean? So
sure.
And, when somebody blurs their background, you can't even see that. I mean, there's all kinds of weird stuff that goes on, and you just got to be really alert.
You mentioned before that when you take on a client, they come to you because they have a problem, and you do an analysis to see what you need to do to address that problem. Are there one or two most common problems that you see?
So one thing that our clients have in common is they're trying to improve the productivity of something, right? So they're trying to increase sales to either hit budget, to meet growth initiatives. So there's an increase in productivity. Or the secondary problem is to reduce something. So we're doing some business with a company that was competing against Nielsen ratings, and it was a technology solution. And their sales process, their technology was better than the way Nielsen did business. And I'm still under non-disclosure to even kind of bring it up who it is, but very well thought out company. But the amount of time it was taking them to make a sale was probably 3 times as long because they lacked the credibility. So they had to kind of solve it in the sales process because that sales cycle time was driving cost up, right? So it's usually they're usually the two primary things, something around an increase in productivity or a reduction in the amount of time it takes them to do something. And then the last thing, usually kind of that lagger, is to increase quality of something, like the quality of the relationship or the quality of the individual. But usually the two outcomes have to do with productivity or time or cost base.
Those sound like pretty fundamental issues. If I had asked you this question before the pandemic, would you have given me pretty much the same answer?
Absolutely. I would say it's not as much about what's different as more about what the same is. What was acceptable with how we did business was pretty standard. So if you took a semi-complex to complex B2B sales process, there were things that were pretty standard. There were certain times that you'd have a conference call, but there were bigger parts of the sales process that you would do in person. Now it's the Wild West. I mean, it could be anything, right? It goes back to that manufacturing example. We need to be face to face. Well, what you need and what your clients and customers want and prospects want might be something different. So what you need to be is pliable, right? So
could you have done as much over Zoom before the pandemic as is being done now if you thought to try it, or were people just not ready for it back then?
Oh, you know what? I mean, there are so many conversations. One thing for our business, doing hybrid learning and coaching on Zoom, smaller sessions, shorter, more focused sessions. I mean, it's driven our profitability. It's helped dramatically. Sometimes, innovation comes out of just necessity, and we figured it out in record time. And I'm sure a lot of other companies did too. So I don't think by any chance, we found the cure, but for our own business, we did. And, we did because we had to. And it was the technology was there.
Yep.
It wasn't like it wasn't there. I mean, we were using it like a hybrid. We were using something called an enablement tool using ClearSlide, which we still use, which had a component of being able to deliver a deck or a proposal through a virtual way. And we still use portions of that software. But I would say we could have, we just didn't, which that's actually probably made us as a business more alert to technology options. I would say that's why we are so on this AI kick right now. We're already in development and ready to launch a tool that would take all of our IP and you'd be able to talk to it and it would coach you, right? Just based off our content and our philosophy. I mean, we're already invested in it. It's another company, but we've invested a bit because we want to be in front of it as much as possible.
Tell me about that. You've taken the things you've learned, the things you've been training salespeople, sales teams on for years, and you've partnered with another company to create an AI solution that somebody can.
It's essentially it's learned all of our IP. So essentially, it's learned like our foundational book, Selling is an Away Game. It's ingested all that. So this could be launched from a learning experience platform. They could ask it a specific questions like, how do you resolve an objection? And it would actually come back with our methodology and coach it live. What does that do to our trainers? I still don't think it does anything to our trainers. Still think people are going to want to engage with humans. I think the more AI gets out there, the more we're going to kind of question a little bit, right? And I think it's going to be a blended experience, but we're way in front of that. Where before, I don't know. I don't know if that I would have had so much speed to put that investment toward it. I mean, we put some serious money behind it, and it's something we're probably going to launch to other training companies through this other party. It hasn't been fully launched, but it's go to market in the next 2 months. It's how fast it's moving at the speed of light.
Do you have a sense what your profit margins will be for the AI product versus a human product?
I sense our net profit on that would probably be 60%, where we're pretty disciplined with our net profit, but it would be probably twice as much as what our normal stuff would be. And it's repeatable, it's scalable, and it's sellable.
Wow. Are your employees nervous?
No, because at some level they're involved in acknowledging how it needs to be done, right? I mean, we fully have integrated the use of AI. And I mean, think about it this way. And I'm not here selling AI. I'm just.
Oh, I understand.
I'm literally telling everybody on here that don't be the last of the buggy whip salespeople, right? I'm assuming when the calculator came out, everybody panicked. That was an accountant, right? So I don't think there's a reason to panic at all. And I think if you're watching the news, I mean, and depending on what news you watch or all of them, they're going to cause some kind of panic, right?
Sure.
Let me put this in perspective. ChatGPT 3 has an IQ of 155. Okay. Einstein had an IQ of 160. ChatGPT 4 will probably be 3 to 5 times that, and it's probably 3 months away. So it's not as easy as just plugging something in. You actually have to know what you're talking about to ask it a good question to get the answer you're searching for. And then 9 times out of 10 in the business we're in, you're still going to have to deliver the information anyway, right? So it can give you guidelines. So that's like having a person that writes copy for you. So what? I can have somebody help me with the copy of one of my books, but I still got to go out and figure out how to sell it, get it to market, blah, 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 and talk about it. All right, fair enough.
You also have to read that copy before you publish it.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you dive into this, Lance? What got you started down the AI road?
First of all, I'm like anybody else. Like, you're watching things happen. There was I think what got me onto it so quick is I have been fascinated, and there's a book called The Last Testament. It was written by and I will think of this before it's over. There was a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and he wrote a book.
Was it The Last Lecture?
Yes, I can remember that he was talking about gamification of learning. And I've watched my kids for years play Call of Duty and all these things. And so I've always been fascinated how we integrate that into learning, whether it be a sim or something like that. So once AI hit, I'm like, oh, this is like perfect. Like this is I don't think it's going to revolutionize. I'm not a believer it's going to put things out of business and people out of business. I was the front end of the internet, like email. Like I started a business when we started to use email. Right. And then websites and stuff like that. And it was going to put learning out of business and training out of business for years. And it's done nothing but grow it. So I can't foresee that happening. But my fascination probably started with the gamification of things. And because I think AI kind of enhances all that.
Is there still a place for cold calling?
Oh, yeah. Like one of our good customers is Fleming's Private Dining. Great customer of ours, right? So it's these folks that sell private dining experiences for big meetings and board meetings and stuff like that. And Fleming's is a great place to have a steak, right? Well, they cold call, right? And I would say to the most complex media companies that we deal with, those people cold call. Now, the vehicle which you get in touch with people changes, right? So I would say 9 out of 10 of our customers that are semi-complex to a complex B2B sales process, their salespeople have a KPI for cold calling. Now, if you're thinking of cold calling, like, and it's like walking out the door and knocking on doors, I'm not saying that's it, but I counted this summer, we'd had 9 different residential service people knock on our door to either sell painting, extermination, lawn cutting, or whatever. I don't think it's died. I don't think it's any less than any other time. And I think how you communicate, whether it's your cadence has changed a little bit, right? You're still cold calling, reaching out, calling people that aren't expecting a contact from you, whether that be through LinkedIn, a phone call, email, all the above.
Personally, I haven't answered a phone call from a phone number that I didn't recognize in years. Am I alone in that? Are there still people who pick up the phone, whoever calls?
I called an executive today. So I would just about 3 hours before our call an executive from an NFL team that I'd never met before, who did not have my number. And he picked it up maybe out of curiosity or whatever. And within 3 seconds, I was able to get his attention. So he picked up. Has the number gone down? Yes. Now, if you're thinking it from a residential standpoint, I think there's a difference between a business to business call, residential call. But I think you don't think of the activity as isolated down just to a phone call. I think you gotta kind of soften it up, right? So I think there's a cadence to things. There's having a reason to call. So maybe that's coming through with some marketing, emailing, or note or an offer, right? Then there's in B2B, you could be hitting people up on LinkedIn, right? There could be a text in there. But I would say the phone's still being used as I've yet to see with any of our clients, and we have some sophisticated clients where people weren't on the phone. Now, some of their marketing has gotten better. Some of their lead gen's gotten better, or they're doing more of other stuff, but it's still a piece of it.
I think every business owner thinks that he or she sells better than any salesperson they could ever possibly hire. And
they're probably right about that, I'm guessing.
Well, so there's something to be said to the entrepreneurial soul. So I would say you gave birth to this product or service or this business. There's nobody that's going to sell it with your passion, vigor, perseverance that you do. I think the problem starts when the founder, president, owner tries to hire salespeople that are similar to them. I think that is where the mistake's made.
Oh, interesting. Similar to them in what way?
Nobody is as passionate about Tyson Group as I am.
Sure.
My name's on it. Like, it's just, it's my signature. It's on it. So like I inherit, it's part of my, it's an organism to me, right? It's living, breathing. And that's kind of that entrepreneurial mindset or that entrepreneurial soul. So I think that's hard. It's hard to hire people that would have that kind of passion. Now, could I hire somebody that was good at qualifying a lead? Yeah. Could I hire somebody that was good at asking questions? Yeah. Could I hire somebody that was a kick-ass presenter? Yeah. Could I hire somebody that was like dauntless when it came to like negotiating? Yes. But to put them up against me is not fair to the individual. It's not. So I gotta look for ways to hire that person. There's another entrepreneur though that thinks that salespeople are born, so they're on this mission to find this person who is just perfect. And then when they hire that person who's just a really naturally good salesperson, then they kind of get held hostage by that person too. So that person ends up, they kowtow to them a little bit, they cater to them. So I think you got to be careful with that. And I think if you're in a business that it has to be sold, where you have to sell contracts or you have to convince, somebody what's different between your product or service versus somebody else other than the price. I think that's when you have to go into that growth mode, is when you start thinking of that, where you have to duplicate your efforts, right? Where if you brought in $500,000, how can I find somebody that can bring in 250? Now, remember, if the founder brought in $500,000 in new business, you're going to be hard pressed to find somebody that's going to be sell with your passion. So you can't stick them exactly at the goal you are, because you're going to do things and act different ways that somebody you hire is never going to be able to do.
You keep mentioning passion. Is that the most important thing you look for when you're hiring a salesperson?
I think it's coachability. I think it's somebody that's coachable. We have an ism internally. We believe you can't lead or be led if you're not willing to be coached. I just think sales is so dynamic right now that you got it. Like my vice president of sales, Gina, I have a call right after this with her, and she is the most coachable person. Now, she'll debate with me and she'll disagree with me. At the end of the day, she's coachable. And I would measure somebody being coachable is, did they make the adjustment? I have 3 sons, Zach, Jared, and Cooper. My son, Zach, Lauren, if you talk to him, he's a great listener, but he's a donkey. You would think he's coachable, but he is about it. And it makes him successful, and it's his thing. You would confuse his listening skills with his ability to be a coach. Now, ultimately, he will make a change, but he digs in. Now, if you met my son, Jared, my middle son, Jared, he would give you all the nonverbals that he was horrible at being coached. Like, he'd make faces, he'd rub his head. I'll tell you what, he'll make the change quicker than Zach will, right? So there's a huge difference between being coachable and listening. It's the coachability. It's coachable to execution. I would look for that more than anything in sales. Passion, it's hard to measure.
Do you have any advice for someone who's trying to decide if it's the right time to hire their first salesperson?
Yes, I do. I would say whatever the highest goal you have for them while you're bringing them on, chop a third off of it because the expectation's high. 2, I would say, are you able to train them in a way that gets them to understand the business, the product or service? And you're going to have to acknowledge, are you hiring them to close deals, or you're hiring them to bring opportunities to the top of the funnel? You got to kind of decide there. And the last thing I would do is everybody puts their best act on when they interview. Not everybody that's a great interview is a great hire, right? I would look for some kind of assessment that would measure personality traits. There's a lot there. I mean, there's 2 types of assessments you can do. You can do a descriptive index, which is kind of like, look at personality traits, like you got your Myers-Briggs and your discs and stuff like that. Or you have a predictive index, right? One that we actually sell is Chally, which looks at sales skills, either or both. I think if you're going to hire somebody, you want to kind of get to know them, especially for sales. What are you dealing with, right? Because the sales job is different than any job. It's not your controller. It's not your operations person. And very rarely can people do both. And so you don't want if you're hiring a salesperson, have them focus on sales, right? All the activities around sales.
Some of the skills you're looking for in a salesperson, I think, have changed in recent years. And the way you go about finding people and hiring people has changed with new technologies. How do you find a good salesperson today?
There's so many ways to unpack that one. I think if I'm recommending, and I'm thinking about my own business here, of course, I'm looking to bring them in young and hiring somebody younger and kind of bringing them up to the system. That's kind of our way. We look for, and we're always looking. Like in our business, we look at servers all the time because servers have probably everything you want.
You're talking about restaurant servers.
Servers of restaurants, yeah. Like literally, are they able to facilitate the conversation? Are they able to be in the conversation without dominating the conversation and being the center of attention? Do they demonstrate good listening skills and stuff like that? They say that servers and air traffic controllers have the two most stressful jobs on the planet, right? And I actually believe that. So that's where we're looking all over, right? I'm typically looking at three factors, right? Do they have a level of EQ where they're trying to connect with you and understand you? Are they good at building rapport? Not relationships, rapport is the people skills. And do they present themselves with whatever they do as a credible source? And so that's where we're looking all over the place at all times. We're always trying to recruit.
Have you actually had a good restaurant meal and turned to the server and said, would you be interested in a sales job?
I just literally recruited down in Dallas last week. We were sitting at a table having some drinks at this restaurant at a boutique hotel. And she was our server / it was a bar. So she was serving food, but drinks too. I literally offered her a job.
Where are you standing these days in terms of salary versus commission?
I think you got to be careful that commission is no greater than 40% of the total take. I think the expectation with this younger group is there's some certainty there because there's so much uncertainty.
Or the opposite. I know very smart people who don't believe in commission.
Yeah, and I struggle with that too because I think salespeople have to. I think your expectation of them is different. I think it should be a split. I think there should be upside because most people are hiring to grow. So you want somebody with like a growth mindset. So I think you got to be careful. So I think there's a 70-30 split. 70% base, 30% commission, or but I like to see a little heavier on base these days, just because of the market.
I think the people who talk about eliminating commission and just paying salary are convinced that that's the way to hire team players who will fit in well with the company culture and not cause resentment among other people. And
but the challenge there is this is where, from a sales leadership standpoint, Lauren, like I think sales leaders get it wrong. Like I asked 150 people last week, do you sales lead your team more as a football team, basketball team, or a track team or a wrestling team? And I got a bunch of whys, and a lot of people were like, yeah, it's like a football team. And I'm like, nah, it's actually not. You need salespeople to behave more like a wrestling team, that they're actually more concerned about their weight class, their own KPIs, their own territory, their own product that they're selling, and let them take care of that. And compensation drives behavior, right? About a little over 50% of the behavior is driven by how you compensate somebody. You need salespeople that go out there and get it, that are willing to kind of fight for, like, against an objection, things like that. And if you just pay them a big base, they're not incentivized or comped to do the things you need them to do.
The response you sometimes hear to that is almost everybody has a story about a salesperson who was a very talented salesperson, but solely focused on their own success and didn't necessarily care about the problems they were creating for other people in terms of, it could be deadlines.
But I think that's why you put support around them. I mean, look, I have salespeople on my team that are high maintenance, high performance. So okay, I have trainers that are high maintenance, high performance. I think how you manage around them, and at times, like in some of these markets, you want a catalyst. You literally want a catalyst.
Is there a place where you draw the line? Is there something that you will not accept?
So, yeah, I would draw the line at as long as whatever they're doing is not illegal, immoral, and ethical. That's where I would draw the line. Everything else has to be on the table, especially in sales, because it is a different job. It is just different. You see, you worked at a hotel, right? And you got somebody coming in that wants to use your hotel and your banquet services for a wedding. Well, you're gonna deal with an emotional potential couple. You got a couple different buyers there who's going to pay for it. You got competitors that, is this more about price or is this more about experience? Is it both? I mean, like, you got to get people to defend it. You got to be able to negotiate. Like, you kind of like, and you want to make sure you pay them so they fight a little bit themselves. And let me kind of end this segment with this. I hired a CFO right before the pandemic. Her name is Laura. I said, what I want you to do is I want you to look at the books, I want you to look at our processes and make some recommendations. Well, she did what most good CFOs would. She told me all the areas in the company that she would address. So she immediately, Lauren, goes and says, your salespeople are being paid too much money. I go, where? I said, salary base. She goes, look, we got to drive better profitability. I would actually hit some of the commissions here. I said, okay, fair enough. She goes, you're going to do it? I go, well, I want you to kind of experience sales process and see what they do before you make the recommendation. At that point, we had owned this call center, so we had invited these potential prospects to our office to look at our process. So Laura was in the meeting. My VP of sales was in the meeting, who was driving the sale, myself, and we had about 4 people with us that we're selling to. And they started to negotiate heavily because we had kind of put some pricing in before they came to the meeting. And I turned to Laura and I said, hey, Laura, and this was an active negotiation. I said, what are your thoughts on this price point and what should we take out of the deal or put it in based off of what you know about the business? Laura's really tall and she kind of looked up, very dignified, very classy. And she looked up and she paused and she goes, I don't know. And I go, okay. So then I jumped in and we landed at a reasonable place and we ended up winning the business. So they walked out. We shook everybody's hand and we were going to get an SOW over. Laura, as they walked out of the conference room, asked my VP if she could have a moment with me. She closed the door. She called me she made up names. I'd never been so embarrassed. You blah, 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 blah. I'm like, whoa. I was like, settle down. And I go, why are you so frustrated? And she goes, I was unprepared for that. I was uncomfortable with that. I feel like you put me on the spot. I go, listen, Laura, I've hired you because you're articulate. You have a good business. She goes, I just felt I was being pressured to make a decision right there. I go, oh, right. So the pressure of the situation got you. I said, so, hey, I do want you to recognize, because I'm accepting what you did and I probably could have prepared you, but I wanted to see how you did in the moment. Our salespeople deal with that, our version of that, every single day. How do you feel now about cutting their commissions?
What did she say?
She goes, good point. I mean, she still had some other points there, and we landed in a place, and, our relationship, she's a great person, blah, 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 blah. But she did acknowledge that that's different. Being in a pressure cooker and having to respond in an impromptu and extemporaneous way was hard. And I said, is a couple percentage points really worth it, or when are people ready to go? And be very ready to go situationally and have some skin in the game so they fight, right? So that was kind of the point.
You talked before about the cousins of sales, and I'm curious, I assume that when you sell your own services, you focus on the sales process naturally, but I assume you also use other forms of marketing. I'm wondering how you think about integrating other forms of marketing with the sales process you've created.
Ironically enough, we had a meeting about this earlier with our VP of marketing, Chip, and Gina, the VP. We campaign, so we'll get a lot of our IP out there. We market with books, like, my books are in Hudson News and, in every airport, somebody will pick it up. We enter into a company, through, we call it spider webbing. So we typically will go at a C-suite because C-suites are always concerned about top line and bottom line growth, right? So we'll go after them. We'll go after a level 2 decision maker, whether it be a chief sales officer.
When you say go after, how are you going after them?
Yeah, so we target them. The salespeople target people with pretty. We have a strong ideal prospect profile. There's a certain type of organizational level person we go after, And when we prospect an organization, we don't prospect one person, we prospect three, right?
But are you doing this through email, through phone calls, through?
Yeah, it's cadence it's all over. It's usually outreach with a marketing email campaign, an invite to a webinar. They visit our website that goes into the top of a funnel. We start funneling down. As there becomes more engagement, right? Or the salesperson will look at a company from a referral standpoint and start prospecting directly through email, then a follow-up phone call. Everybody on here needs to know that pre-pandemic, it took 6 to 8 touches to contact a prospect in most businesses. Since the pandemic, it's 9 to 12, according to our research partners. So your touch points has increased by almost 30%.
Why do you think that is?
I just think people are harder to get a hold of now. They're hiding out. The good news is with everything, though, is most phone systems, corporate phone systems, because of the pandemic, go right to somebody's cell phone. So texting, once you get somebody's phone number, the chance of you actually have their cell phone number or whatever number you has goes right to their cell phone number is significantly high.
I never thought of that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. And there's actually one little hack right now that's really working. It's kind of interesting. If you have an iPhone, if you wanted to text somebody, right, there's little things you can do at the bottom of a text, right? And there's a blue squiggly line where you can leave a voice note. And you could actually send, instead of sending somebody a text, you send them a voice note that gets delivered via text. And if you have an iPhone, you can tell if they actually listen to it.
Are you active on social media?
Yeah, we are really active. I think the big thing about social media, too, if you're in selling right now, you almost have to treat it a little bit because you can message people like that is part of the conversation. And that's what fragments it. Like we have one salesperson on our team. He's our senior director, and everybody at Tyson Group sells at some level. He is extremely good at having conversations with people on LinkedIn and Facebook. And then he moves the conversation to an email. So he like fragments it out and really leverages that. So he's just exceptional at it.
Have you figured out a way to get your people to actually do what they're supposed to do in your CRM?
Yeah. First of all, as a company, our philosophy is we own the prospects. And since they're owned by the company, they're not owned by the individual. If you don't have all the information filled out in CRM, you run the risk of not getting paid your full commission.
That sounds serious.
I mean, there's a carrot and a stick. You're not going to carrot everybody, right? There's a consequence. If you run a stop sign, there are consequences. You might get a ticket. If you don't fully fill out everything that's needed.
Tell me if this is your experience. I hear this is a constant problem. Nobody uses their CRM to its full potential, and it's really hard to get people to take it as seriously as they should.
Yeah, I think that's an expectation problem. Here, let me give you an example. I was sitting down with a couple executives with an NHL team. And it was a small sponsorship team. And I was having breakfast with a guy, let's say a guy named Cam and a guy named Ryan. And they were talking about their culture and things like that. And I said, and this actually came up, and they were talking about our people will not engage in CRM. I go, well, why? I don't understand why they wouldn't. And what have you done to get them? And they're like, we literally talk to them, about all the reasons why they should, how it's good for the business, how it's good for them. We've had contests, we've incentivized, we rewarded them. I said, okay. So what you're telling me is you have 5 people or 6 people that are insubordinate. That's what it sounds like. I mean, so what they do in a ship with insubordination, just make people walk the plank. I go, we're not going to do that. I go, right. I said, so they go, what could we do? I said, well, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them want. And they said, drink. I go, right, but you can put salt in their oats. So I said, just make an announcement that, hey, here's the expectation for CRM, that in order to have a deal, these are the absolutes. And just make an announcement that if this isn't filled out completely, these are the parameters, that you run the risk of getting a delay in your commissions or a reduction in your commission. And they go, HR will never buy that. I said, I didn't ask you whether HR was going to buy it or not. I said, you just make the freaking announcement. And I said, just trust me, run the test. I just put it out in an email and make an announcement. The next week, they had 95% of compliance.
Wow.
Right. But the point is, like, the expectation's there. Some of your audience might be like, wow, Lance, you're so hardcore. I'm actually not, because don't judge what I'm saying on one minor thing that you don't have high engagement in. I mean, I would tell you, even in my own company, the average, we have 25 people. The average length a person's been with us, the longest has been 20 years. I've had 4 people that have been with us all the way from the time they got out of college to 35 years old. I had a former VP leave to go, to raise her children. She says, "Hey, I think this is it, blah, blah." I said, "Jess, I'm just going to put you on sabbatical." She's been on sabbatical for 3 years. She just came back yesterday.
Well, I've really enjoyed this. My thanks to Lance Tyson and, of course, to our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com.
Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN@21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.